Joining me now, David Gazzard and Ben Oquist. Ben, the states have been called on to do more. There's no doubt, if you look at the numbers, New South Wales has taken the lion's share of international return, repatriated Australians. The other states well behind. They should be doing more.
Well, the Commonwealth should work out how to get more people in and work with the states constructively to get it done. We've had this endless debate about the state's borders being closed and the hardship that's been causing people. Fair enough to have that debate, but I think the debate about our international borders and how we get more people back in here, we should have heard more. I don't understand how that can all be the state's fault as well. Clearly there's a leadership role for the Commonwealth to coordinate with the states, as Anthony Albanese has put well today. We've got a big country, we've got lots of empty hotel rooms, we've got lots of space. The Commonwealth should be doing more to work with the states to allow people who want to come back safely.
David Gazzard, your thoughts on that? Because the states obviously need to lift their caps, but should the Prime Minister and the government be driving that harder?
Yeah, I think this has been something that's been worked through with National Cabinet, so the states have had a go. But the PM has indicated, and the Deputy Prime Minister have indicated, they want that to go faster. There are Australians who are desperate to get home, and we want them home. But the states still control borders. There's a federal coordination role in there. But this is one of the places, I think, where the states have got to be spending more, given they're only putting 2% of state product into responses, while the federal government's committed, 16 to 18% of GDP. So there is a cost to this. You've got to be quarantined in a hotel. New South Wales is by far and away doing the heaviest of heavy lifting, and we can't allow, our own people to be languishing overseas when they want to get home, while the states do their best to preserve their state balance sheets. So it's time for them to come to the party.
And if they want to be parochial, they keep saying, like the Premier said infamously, Queensland hospitals are for Queenslanders. Yeah, these aren't just New South Welshmen and West Australians, these are Queenslanders as well. So it's for everyone to respond.
We have a remarkable opportunity, provided we don't slip back into provincialism, to get the best and the brightest from the world who are looking for a safe haven. I'm thinking, Hong Kong, but I'm also thinking industries that need a benchmark place like Australia where we've got really good health outcomes. Not just our own people. We could be broader than that. We could be attracting some of the global best talent to Australia to run their business from here. I think that's where the federal government wants to go, but we're sliding back to provincialism.
I know of one individual who's working for Google out of Silicon Valley, now in Belconnen. It's happening already.
There is opportunity here, right? Massive opportunity for Australia. But we can't allow ourselves to be sort of sliding back into parochialism, as you say.
Well, it is parochialism, and I do hope that it dissipates a bit, because quite frankly, some of it has been outrageous. But you make the point that the national borders need to be the focus as well. You're right about that, because there are upwards of 20,000 Australians still overseas,
and people can't get planes back. I thought it was a useful intervention from the opposition leader today to say that the government should be considering using RAF planes to get people back. There's a lot of people...
There are already commercial planes coming back, according to Simon Birmingham, with empty seats.
Well, yet there's all these stories about people being knocked off seats and not being able to get them and having something booked and then having it taken away from them. We've seen hardship case after hardship case after hardship case. Those people aren't making it up. The government either needs to get to the bottom of why they've been kicked off flights or get flights put in place. But let's go back to the big picture. We've got this National Cabinet. The National Cabinet is meant to be working these things out together. That was the whole point of what the Prime Minister said he was putting in place, to allow a coordinated effort. Now,
there's always going to be hiccups though, isn't there? Overall it's been pretty good. If you look at I know we've seen this devastating second wave in Victoria, but the numbers are nearly under 1,000 now in that state. The fortnightly average is under 50. They've made great progress, and hopefully we get back to where we were a couple of months ago as a nation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote about this strongly off the front page in The Australian, saying that the Prime Minister had done a great job in handling the early stages of this crisis, and that people should cut him some slack and give him some credit. But you have to say, here we are near the end of the year. He's not leading a national consensus approach. Now, I'm sure there's faults on all sides. But ultimately, it's on the Prime Minister to try and use this as an opportunity to bring the nation together and not divide it.
He would like to see a consensus return, surely, at the National Cabinet.
There's been plenty of disagreements that have happened inside National Cabinet. I hate to sort of tell you that. There's been a lot of debate, and there's been areas where the states have got over the top of the feds. I'm thinking about school closures in the early days of the first wave. So there's room for disagreement around this, provided everyone works together. I mean, I would be thinking, if I was Anthony Albanese, rather than going to the PM who's pulled this together now for the last 7 months, I'd be thinking, is there a role here for me to pick up the phone to the Labor premiers rather than casting it back to the Prime Minister to say, Anastasia and Premier McGowan, why don't you think about taking a few more, returning Australians to your state rather than saying, well, it's all the Prime Minister's fault. That would be point number one. There is a role here for pressure to be applied to those states to do some heavy lifting.
Here's the clever thing that I think the Prime Minister is doing. We're debating endlessly what the states are doing and not doing. And I think that's probably a clever political strategy.
But it's also fair, to be honest. If you look at New South Wales' average on their take is over 2,200 they take international returning Aussies, Australians. Queensland, 526, WA, 512. Nowhere near what New South Wales is doing. I know they're a more populous state, but still, it's nowhere near that number. It's a fair point to make.
And if you have states that are recalcitrant on this, where do you go? You've got no choice but to actually get it out there publicly, because we've got people sitting waiting to get home.
We're 3 weeks out from the federal budget, facing a fiscal cliff, according to UBS, of $57 billion less going into the December quarter than the September quarter from the federal government. That's what we should be debating. That's what the federal government is ultimately responsible for. Managing how to get out of, how to keep JobKeeper going, how to lift the rate of New Start, how to avoid this massive fiscal cliff coming, the ineffectiveness of tax cuts. The main responsibility of the federal government is to keep this economy going, facing the worst recession in 100 years, a 7% drop in the June quarter, and when by its own figures, there's going to be some tens of billions of dollars less of federal government money flowing into a sinking economy in the December quarter. That's what we should be debating. That's the main job of the federal government.
I think we'll be debating that. I think there'll be money for all sorts of things that are going to keep the economy going, but you've got people sitting at airports now and not wanting to wait around till after the October budget so they can get home. And you've got states that are saying, we're coming up to a state election. We won't exactly explain what the reasons are for our border closures, but we're going to be sticking with Queenslanders for Queensland hospitals. And you've got returning citizens, as you point out, Kieran.
Let's focus on some good news. Good on Andrew Barr and the Premier of South Australia working out a bubble between Canberra and South Australia.
Both being reasonable.
Agree entirely.
I think Andrew Barr's prosecuted a reasonable, consistent strategy. He's complained about things, but he's done it with, a bit of political finesse, and he's got a result in the end.
Yeah, and just, I guess, reason. It's just, you look at the situation, and it's a reasonable outcome. There are a few other decisions happening around this country which are not reasonable at all. Let's look at the government's announcement yesterday on the gas scenario. What's the situation there? Is this a potential white elephant, given the speed with which other energies are becoming cheaper?
We're one of the biggest exporters of natural gas already. We need a transition fuel. The government wants to make sure that we can keep the lights on. I think there is a huge amount of investment in other newer technology which is coming on stream, but in the middle of that, we still have to make sure we've got base load. And in the interim years, gas is going to be part of that picture. I think, you've got this place where government can fill a role as the sector looks to adjust away from traditional fuels, but we're going to be in a situation like California, if we're not careful, where you're having blackouts unless there's reliable fuel, and gas, is a key export for us, and it's cleaner. So
Alan Finkel, the chief scientist, agrees with that. The Labor Party agrees with that at the moment. Certainly, I know there's some debate in there, but there's been no opposition to this particular stance from Labor?
I think this policy announcement has already turned into a schmozzle. I just watched Angus Taylor's interview there. I don't think, with you, I don't think you could answer the questions about why industry was saying this is actually going to create more investment uncertainty. The gas industry itself doesn't believe you can get gas at $4 a gigajoule. AEMO's on all the forecasts has looked at gas across the country. You can't get it out at $4, let alone transport it at $4. So the price modelling doesn't back up from the government. Here's another thing. The Liddell Industry Task Force has been finally released today. 2 years after it was kind of first commissioned. It was commissioned because the government wanted to prove Liddell should stay open. We finally had that 2 years later. And does it say there's a 1,000 megawatt shortfall? Not at all. It says we don't need Liddell to stay open. A modern smart energy grid, demand response, battery storage is a way to get cheaper prices. Gas is the most expensive form of electricity around.
You still need a power which you can switch on at any time, given regardless of the weather.
You need a balanced grid. But I say if the government forces more gas in when it's not needed, according to all the experts, it's a recipe for higher electricity prices.
David,
gas makes electricity more expensive.
Gas has made the US energy efficient. It has cut its greenhouse gas emissions, and it's one of the cheapest fuels going around.
David Gazzard, Ben Oquist, gents, nice to see you both.